Take a look at me. If you didn't know me, what would you think I do for a living? When I pose that question, I'm typically met with one of 4 responses. Rock musician, bartender, hairstylist, and tattoo artist. Now, while these are all admirable occupations, none of them describe my profession accurately. Would it surprise you to know that my list of occupations has included, among many things, church organist, international tour guide for students, college professor, and I teach fitness classes, many of which are attended by senior citizens. Why is this so surprising to people? Well, 23 years ago, I began to understand the disparity. As an eager college senior, I was thrilled to launch my career in public education with the last step in my collegiate journey, my student teaching assignment. I had always dreamed of becoming a teacher. Mom was a teacher. Dad was a teacher. My aunties and my cousins were teachers. My sister-in-law and my brother-in-law are teachers. Even grandma and grandpa got in on the action. No, they weren't teachers, but they were the custodians at the college we all attended. I was, by all accounts, destined to become a teacher. So, one can imagine my consternation to receive a phone call indicating that my hosting teacher from Fargo, North Dakota, had contacted my college after our initial 15-minute meeting, and she sought to reject me as a student teaching candidate. Her rationale? She was offended by me. More specifically, she was offended that I had my nose pierced. And just to clarify, at that time, I looked like this. Not this. Her dictum: remove the piercing or don't serve in her classroom. I was told, comply with the request or you will lose your student teaching placement. Your financial aid will be revoked and your college graduation will be delayed by an entire year. Now, the answer to my quandary may seem clear to all of you: remove that piercing. But even to rule-following, daughter of the conservative Lutheran pastor, 4.0 college student, it wasn't so clear. I was astounded that I could be treated with what I not only perceived to be blatant discrimination, but more so blatant disregard for simply getting to know me as a person. A process that would certainly assuage any concerns about my professionalism, my morality, or my fitness for a position as a 9th grade English student teacher. How could something as minor as a 2mm gold nose stud be a barrier preventing my entrance into my chosen profession? Why didn't she just talk to me? and get to know me as a person. Decades later, I am certain that choices about my appearance continue to inform and guide others' perceptions of my credibility, my approachability, maybe even my sensibility. Did it affect your perception of me? See, it's undeniable that aspects of our physical appearance will guide our perceptions of one another. Yeah, but like all of you, I don't want my physical appearance to be the sole signpost for others' understanding of who I am. I want them to seek to know me personally and wholly. So, to know me personally and wholly, let's just take a second. I want to clear a couple of things up. First of all, I actually am a musician, but classically trained. And while I don't work in a bar, I can make a pretty mean margarita. And no, I'm not a hairstylist, but I got really lucky. My husband is a hairstylist from London. And while I've sat in the tattoo chair for hundreds of hours, I've never given anyone a tattoo. I have, however, since that fateful day decades ago, dedicated my life and my career to studying identity and hoping to foster spaces where others can explore and construct their identities. For example, I have conducted and published major research projects on tattoo studios as postmodern spaces of agency. I give international presentations on how our identity is a form of rhetorical equipment. And I guess you could say that my body serves as my text evidence. So despite what you might expect, I'm not here to promote cavalier disregard for dress code policies or workplace norms. And don't worry, I'm not here to implore you to go get piercings. Rather, I believe by design, authenticity has legs. And I'd like to ask how we can stand in communion with one another in our processes of identity construction and use dialogue as a way to create more authentic space. To stand in that space, let's not wax poetic or offer Instagram therapizing fluff and buff. Identity construction is an intricate process. It's informed by a hefty dose of theory, and it's guided by our lived experiences. From an academic lens, it likely starts with sociologist Irving Goffman, who popularized the notion of something he called impression management. He argued that impression management is vital to our social interactions, and it refers to our conscious and unconscious attempts to influence the perceptions that we have of one another. In other words, we make deeply personal but evolving choices about what we want to communicate about ourselves. And then we have to reckon with the merits and the consequences of those choices. Now, I likely spend more time in impression management than some, but I acknowledge this was an intentional choice I made based on my experience, where I have consciously chosen to use my body as a way to invite conversation and perhaps defy some expectations and some stereotypes. But it hasn't always worked. However, I still try in earnest to stand in authenticity. Why? Because living authentically, it's foundational to our sense of freedom. And it is essential to living a meaningful life. When we are authentic to our own questions, our own nature, our own experiences, do you know what happens? We can actually travel through the deep with one another beautifully. Professor Stephen Joseph, who is a pioneer in authenticity research, he champions the idea that we must know ourselves, own ourselves, and be ourselves to live an authentic life. Know yourself. Own yourself. Be yourself. This process of working toward self-actualization is what Carl Rogers, a renowned humanistic psychologist, believes is our natural human urge. But sometimes we consciously or inadvertently disrupt the process for ourselves and, unfortunately, for others, simply because we don't bother to talk, to ask, or to learn. Admittedly, standing in authenticity decades ago back in North Dakota, that was grueling. With my college graduation on the phone in one hand and my chosen self-presentation in the other, it was brutal to know myself, own myself, and be myself, because I felt misread, devalued, and frankly, crushed. All I wanted was the chance to talk to her, to feel like she was interested in hearing my perspectives and to understand her perspectives and her rationale. You see, when we come together in communicative exchanges where we can be our authentic selves, guess what happens? We flourish. And when we create space for others to do the same, they flourish. And often all it takes to bridge that gap is just a conversation. Even science tells us this is true. David Bohm, who was a contemporary of Einstein and a rogue physicist, provided a template for understanding the scientific value of dialogue. He believed that a significant challenge we face in our world is this idea of fragmentation. Fragmentation of our communities and fragmentation of ourselves. He argued that when we are faced with unknown or challenging situations, we tend to rush our thinking and then we rush our responses. But if we were to just pause and invite dialogue, we might be able to suspend fragmentation. Because dialogue, it encourages wholeness. So, when we are approached with clashes in understanding of one another's identities, rejection, silencing, these are not bold responses. Engaging in dialogue is our most embodied form of action because human beings are hardwired to connect, particularly and especially when they face the unknown. Coming together in communicative exchange is what stands us tallest on the legs of authenticity. Because dialogue is the birthplace of creation, where we can know ourselves more and own ourselves more and be ourselves more while we do the same for others. So are you ready to go get some tattoos together? My think tank heroes from the fields of sociology and psychology and rhetoric would all agree that the individual's quest for authentic living, it's a basic human right. And they would argue that coming together in dialogue is one of the most honorable and dignifying ways we can help each other flourish as authentic beings. I was a little girl who, like my family, just wanted to be a teacher. And I was almost denied that opportunity because aspects of my self-presentation conflicted with another's ideals about visible identity. But, spoiler alert, I did become a teacher. And then I became a school administrator. And guess what? Maybe someday I'll be a tattoo artist too. And I will manage others' impressions on the daily, gladly. Hoping to come together and foster spaces where we can co-construct our identities and use dialogue as a way to travel in that journey alongside one another. So, you may be wondering, did I remove that piercing so I could continue with my student teaching? Or did I leave it in and disrupt my entire college graduation? Well, ideally, I would love if we could talk about it. Maybe you could ask and learn. We could have a dialogue. But until we can have that chat, Here's to standing on the legs of authenticity. I left that piercing in.